The great chamber of the Galactic Harmony Council stretched out like a vast bowl carved from white stone. Hundreds of seats rose in perfect circles, each one designed for a different alien species. Some seats had pools of water for the fish-like, cetaceans. Others glowed with heat lamps for the cold-blooded reptari. A few hung from the ceiling for the flying aviari. In the center of it all sat one lonely figure at a small table marked with Earth's blue and white symbol. Ambassador Day-Ho had been sitting in that same spot for 3 years now. Today, like so many days before, he was alone. Day-Ho looked around the chamber as alien delegates filed into their seats. The Aquilians moved with their usual grace, their blue skin shimmering under the lights. The massive draconian representatives stomped in on heavy feet, their scales clicking against the floor. The insect-like Catherian delegates buzzed as they talked among themselves. None of them looked at the human table. They never did anymore. Council Speaker Veltar called the session to order. The tall Aquilian's voice echoed through the chamber like music, but Day-Ho had learned to hear the cold notes underneath the beauty. Today we consider Proposal 7847 from the Terran Federation, Veltar announced. A request for emergency refugee, protection protocols following attacks on human colonies by Zerion raiders. Day-Ho had spent weeks preparing this proposal. 3 human colonies had been hit by slave raiders from the Zerion Empire. Thousands of civilians had been taken. Children, families, elderly people, all stolen in the night and sold in distant markets. The survivors had fled to refugee camps with nothing but the clothes on their backs. All Day-Ho was asking for was a simple thing. He wanted the council to create safe zones for refugees, places where slavers could not go, ships to help people escape. Basic protection that any civilized society should provide. The first delegate to speak was Mordak from the Catherian Trade Union. The insect-like alien's multiple eyes glittered as he spoke. The Terran proposal shows typical human emotional thinking, Mordak said, his voice buzzing through the translation system. These raids, while regrettable, are a private matter between the Zerion Empire and human colonists. Council intervention would disrupt established trade relationships. Day-Ho felt his jaw tighten. Trade relationships. That was what they called it when the Catherians bought cheap goods from Zerion factories worked by slaves. Delegate Threnok from the Reptari Coalition nodded his massive head. The Catherian representative speaks wisdom. Human colonies chose to settle in dangerous regions. They must accept the consequences of their choices. The Zerion Empire operates within legal bounds, added Speaker Zilandros from the Cetacean Assembly, her words flowing like water. Slavery is their cultural practice. We cannot impose our values on sovereign members. Day-Ho stood slowly. The chamber fell quiet. When humans spoke in council sessions, it was usually worth hearing, even if the delegates rarely agreed. Honored delegates, Day-Ho began, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. I am not asking you to impose values. I am asking you to protect innocent people from being kidnapped and sold like animals. But where does it end? Interrupted Veltar. If we protect human refugees today, tomorrow we must protect Androsi farmers, then Belton miners, then every species with a sob story. The Council cannot be the galaxy's guardian. The Council already protects trade routes, Day-Ho pointed out. You send fleets to stop pirates from attacking cargo ships. Why is protecting property more important than protecting people? Because cargo ships generate economic value, Mordak replied without hesitation. Refugees only consume resources. The words hit Daeho like a physical blow. Around the chamber, dozens of alien heads nodded in agreement. These were supposed to be the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, the wisest species, the leaders of galactic society, and they had just agreed that money was worth more than lives. "The human emotional response is understandable," said Veltar, his tone now gentle but firm. "Your species forms strong attachments to individuals, but governance requires rational thinking. The needs of the many must outweigh the needs of the few." "These are not just a few people," Daeho said. 50,000 humans have been taken by slavers in the past year alone. Entire communities have been destroyed. 50,000 out of billions, replied Delegate Karthos from the Nexari Republic. "A statistical rounding error. The Council cannot reshape galactic policy for such small numbers." Daeho looked around the chamber one more time. He saw faces that looked back at him with polite indifference. Some delegates were already checking their data pads, ready to move on to more important business. Others whispered among themselves about trade deals and mining rights. This was the 7th time he had brought this proposal to the Council. 7 times he had explained the suffering of human refugees. 7 times he had been told that protecting innocent people was too expensive, too complicated, too emotional. For 3 years, Daeho had believed that he could make them understand. He had thought that if he just explained things clearly enough, if he just found the right words, these advanced alien civilizations would remember what it meant to care about others. He had been wrong. "The vote will now commence," announced Veltar. "All in favor of Terran Proposal 7847? No hands were raised, no tentacles lifted, no wings fluttered. The chamber sat in perfect stillness. All opposed? A forest of appendages rose into the air. 41 species voted against protecting human refugees. Only the empty human section remained still. "The proposal is rejected," Veltar announced. "Next item of business." But Daeho was no longer listening. He gathered his papers slowly, methodically. 3 years of proposals, 3 years of speeches, 3 years of believing that these aliens were better than they actually were. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single data pad. He had prepared this document weeks ago, hoping he would never need to use it. But watching the casual dismissal of human suffering, seeing aliens nod approvingly as they voted to abandon refugees to slavers, Daeho realized the time had come. He walked to the central podium where speakers addressed the council. The chamber gradually fell quiet as delegates noticed the human ambassador approaching. Daeho placed the datapad on the podium with a soft click that somehow echoed through the vast chamber. "The Terran Federation hereby formally withdraws from the Galactic Harmony Council," he announced. His voice was calm, without anger or bitterness. "This withdrawal is effective immediately. We thank the Council for its time and wish all member species well in their future endeavors." The silence that followed was complete. No alien moved, no translator hummed. Even the air recycling systems seemed to hold their breath. Daeho walked back to the human table, gathered his remaining papers, and headed for the exit. His footsteps echoed in the shocked silence. As he reached the great doors of the chamber, he paused and looked back one final time. 41 species sat frozen in their seats, staring at the empty podium where the datapad still lay. For the first time in 3 years, every alien in the chamber was looking at the human section. But it was too late. The seat was already empty. Daeho walked through the doors without another word. Behind him, the Galactic Harmony Council sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what had just happened. They would have a long time to figure it out. Captain Minho stood on the bridge of the cargo ship Morning Star, watching the last human transport leave Kepler Station. Through the wide windows, he could see the massive medical facility that had served as the galaxy's premier trauma center for the past 8 years. In just 3 days, it would be empty of all human staff. The evacuation was going exactly as planned. No panic, no rushed packing, no angry speeches broadcast across the galaxy. Humanity was leaving Council space the same way they had lived in it, quietly, efficiently, and with dignity. "Captain," called Lieutenant Yunseo from her station, "we have incoming transmission from Station Commander Thilros." Minho nodded. "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the worried face of a Zephyrian. The alien's silver skin had turned pale, and his large eyes darted nervously. "Captain Minho, please. You must reconsider this madness. Dr. Yunji cannot leave now. We have 300 patients in critical care. The new surgical techniques she developed, without her knowledge, they will die." "Commander Thilros," Minho replied calmly, "Dr. Yunji has spent the past week training your medical staff. She has also uploaded all human medical procedures to your databases. Your people will have everything they need." "But the techniques are too complex," Thilros pleaded. "The precision required, the timing. It took your doctors years to master these methods. We have had only days." Minho felt a familiar weight in his chest. Dr. Yunji had revolutionized trauma surgery throughout the galaxy. Her neural reconstruction methods had saved millions of lives. The irony was not lost on him that the Council had once tried to ban. These same techniques, calling them unnecessarily aggressive and typical human brutality. "I understand your concerns," Minho said, "but the decision has been made." The screen went dark. Through the bridge windows, Minho watched another transport ship dock at the station. Soon, Dr. Yunji herself would board the Morning Star, along with the last 30 human medical staff on Kepler Station. 2 hours later, Dr. Yunji walked onto the bridge. The middle-aged woman looked tired but determined. Her medical bag was slung over her shoulder, the same bag she had carried when she first arrived at Kepler Station to help with a plague outbreak that had killed millions. "All patients have been stabilized and transferred to alien medical teams," she reported. "I've left detailed instructions for every ongoing treatment. The Zephyrian doctors are skilled. They will manage." "Any regrets?" Minho asked quietly. Yunji looked back through the windows at the station where she had spent the best years of her career. "I regret that we waited so long to leave, but not the leaving itself." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on 100 worlds. Admiral Sung Min commanded the withdrawal of human defense fleets from Council border regions. His ships had been the backbone of Council defense for decades, but the Council had repeatedly complained about human military contamination of their forces. "Admiral," called his aide, Commander Ji-hoon, "we're receiving multiple emergency signals from Council Defense Command. They want to know our departure schedule." Sungmin smiled grimly. "I'm sure they do." His forces had been monitoring long-range sensors for months, tracking massive energy signatures moving through dark space toward Council territory. The readings matched no known technology, and the formations suggested hostile intent. But every time human intelligence had shared these warnings, the Council had dismissed them as human paranoia and warmongering. "Send a final report to Council Defense Command," Sung Min ordered. Include all our sensor data on the anomalous contacts approaching from dark space. Tell them our early warning networks will shut down in 72 hours, and all tactical databases will be purged, as previously requested to prevent human military contamination. Sir? Ji-hoon hesitated. Should we warn them directly about the threat? We have warned them, Commander. 15 times in the past 6 months. They chose not to listen. Sung-min turned to face his aide. We cannot force someone to accept help they do not want. Meanwhile, Engineer Bo-Ram supervised the shutdown of the quantum communication relay network that connected the galaxy's outer rim to the core worlds. The relays were a human innovation built over 20 years to bring isolated frontier colonies into galactic civilization. The project had cost the Terran Federation billions of credits and countless hours of labor. The Frontier Coalition is requesting an emergency meeting, reported technician Hyo-jin. They want to know if there's any way to keep the relays operational. Bo-Ram checked her datapad. 47 frontier worlds depended on the human-built network for everything from basic communication to emergency medical consultations. Without the relays, these worlds would be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The relays require constant maintenance, Bo-Ram explained. The exotic matter containment systems are incredibly complex. Only human engineers know how to keep them stable. What about training local technicians? We offered that training 3 years ago, Bo-Ram replied. The Council rejected it as an attempt to spread human technical dependence. They said alien worlds should not rely on human technology. Through the observation deck of Relay Station 7, Bo-Ram could see ships from dozens of species gathering. In space, desperate alien captains were begging for transport, offering huge sums of money for passage to the core worlds before the relays shut down. Many had families on different planets who would be impossible to reach once the network failed. But the decision had been made. The quantum relays powered down one by one, leaving frontier worlds in isolation. Dr. Jin A stood in the main laboratory of the Agricultural Research Center on Ceres Prime. Around her, alien scientists packed equipment and data storage units, with desperate efficiency. The center had been humanity's gift to the galaxy, a place where agricultural specialists from every species worked together to solve food production problems. Dr. Jin A called her Nexari colleague, Zinhal. The drought-resistant grain varieties we developed for the rim worlds. The genetic codes are still incomplete. Without your expertise in protein folding, the project will fail. Jin-A looked at her research notes one last time. The drought-resistant grains could have fed billions of people on water-poor worlds, but the Council had repeatedly delayed approval. For the project, claiming human genetic modification techniques were too dangerous and potentially weaponizable. The base genetic sequences are in the shared database, Jin-A said. Your people will need to complete the work yourselves. But it could take decades, Zinhal protested. People are starving now on the rim worlds. Then perhaps the Council should have approved our proposals when we submitted them 2 years ago, Jin-A replied quietly. As the days passed, the full scale of humanity's quiet contributions became clear. Transport. Captain Wu Jin had been running supply routes to unprofitable frontier worlds for years, carrying medicine and food to places where commercial carriers refused to go. Now, those supply lines went dark. Engineer Q-Wan had maintained atmospheric processors on 17 different worlds, keeping billions of aliens breathing clean air. His maintenance schedules died with him as he boarded a transport back to human space. Diplomat Hye-jin had spent a decade quietly mediating disputes between alien species, preventing dozens of potential wars through careful negotiation. Her departure left several brewing conflicts without their main peacekeeper. Scientist Tai Sung had been developing solutions to ecological disasters across the galaxy. Without his intervention, 7 different worlds faced environmental collapse within the decade. But perhaps the most telling moment came when Communications Officer Young Hee shut down the Galactic Emergency Network. The human-designed system had coordinated rescue operations across Council space for 15 years. Every major disaster response had relied on its sophisticated algorithms to deploy aid where it was needed most. "The system is going offline in 10 minutes, Young Hee announced to the Emergency Coordination Center. "All emergency communications will revert to individual planetary networks." The alien coordinators stared at their screens in growing panic. Without the unified network, tracking disasters across the galaxy would become almost impossible. Response times would increase dramatically. Millions more lives would be lost in future emergencies. "Wait!" called Coordinator Velnix, a draconian female. "How do we restart the system? Where are the control protocols?" "The system requires constant human oversight," Young Hee explained. "The AI networks are designed to interface with human cognitive patterns. Alien minds process information differently. The system will not respond to non-human operators." "But surely you can modify it." Young Hee shook her head. "We offered to train alien technicians and modify the system for broader use. The proposal was rejected 18 months ago as an attempt to make the galaxy dependent on human technology." The countdown timer reached 0. Across Council space, emergency networks went dark. Rescue coordinators found themselves isolated, unable to share information or coordinate responses. The galaxy had suddenly become a much more dangerous place, and through it all, humanity said nothing. No angry broadcasts, no dramatic ultimatums, no threats or demands. They simply packed their belongings, transferred their knowledge, and left. Trade Coordinator Zinhal stared at the shipping manifests on his screen with growing horror. The numbers made no sense. Food shipments to the Rim worlds had dropped by 60% in just 3 months. Medical supplies to frontier colonies were down by half. Critical machinery parts were simply not moving at all. "Run the analysis again," he told his assistant, a young Nexari named Polthen. "There must be an error in the calculations." Polthen's fingers danced over his console. "Sir, I have run the analysis 4 times. The results are accurate. Supply routes to 43 Rim worlds have been completely abandoned." Zinhal felt his stomach drop. "Which shipping companies handled those routes?" "According to the records, no major commercial carriers ever serviced those destinations. The routes were listed as—" Polthen paused, checking his data. "Handled by independent contractors." "What independent contractors?" "The files just say Terran Federation Humanitarian Fleet." The silence in the Trade Coordination Center stretched for long minutes. Zinhal had spent decades managing galactic commerce. He knew every major shipping company, every trade route, every profitable cargo run in Council space, but somehow he had never noticed that humans were quietly maintaining supply lines to the poorest and most isolated worlds in the galaxy. "How long were they running these routes?" Zinhal asked. "According to shipping logs, 17 years, sir." 17 years. For 17 years, human cargo ships had been carrying food, medicine, and supplies to worlds that commercial carriers ignored because the profits were too small. Worlds that would have starved or died of preventable diseases without those. "Regular deliveries. Contact the major shipping companies," Zinhal ordered. See if any of them are willing to take over these routes. The responses came back within hours. Universal cargo declined. The routes were economically unfeasible. Galactic Transport cited excessive operational costs. Even the smaller carriers refused, saying the long distances and low profits made the runs impossible. As the days passed, reports began flooding in from the rim worlds. On Belton 7th, a mining colony of 40,000 aliens faced starvation as food reserves ran low. The colonists had been completely dependent on regular deliveries of protein supplements that their barren world could not produce. On Kepler Minor, a research station studying neutron star formations sent desperate messages requesting medical supplies. Their chief scientist was dying of a rare blood disease that required weekly treatments with synthesized compounds. Without the medicine, she had perhaps a month to live. The Andorian Farming Collective reported that their soil processors were breaking down. These machines were essential for growing food in the planet's toxic soil. Replacement parts had always arrived promptly from human suppliers, but now the machines sat broken while crops died in the fields. Why did we never know about this? Zinhal asked Council Speaker Veltar during an emergency session. Veltar's blue skin had taken on a pale, sickly hue. The humans never requested compensation for these activities. They filed minimal paperwork. Our trade monitoring systems flagged these routes as low priority because of the small cargo values. Small cargo values that kept millions of people alive, Zinhal replied bitterly. But the supply crisis was only the beginning. On the borders of Council space, Admiral Creighton faced a far more serious problem. The Zarian Empire had launched their largest slave raid in decades, targeting 15 defenseless colonies simultaneously. What are our response options? Creighton asked his staff. General Thoxil, a massive draconian, consulted his tactical displays. Our standard defensive protocols call for establishing patrol lines and deploying rapid response fleets. However, the protocols assume integration with the Terran Early Warning Network, which no longer exists, Creighton said grimly. Correct, sir. Without human sensor data, we are operating blind. The enemy fleets could be anywhere. Creighton studied the star maps with growing frustration. For years, Council Defense had relied on human intelligence networks to track threats across the vast expanses of space. The humans had maintained sensor arrays in dark space, operated deep reconnaissance missions, and shared detailed threat assessments with Council forces. All of that was gone now. What about our own intelligence capabilities? Creighton asked. Minimal, sir. Council policy has always been to avoid unnecessary military expenditure on intelligence gathering. The humans provided that service free of charge. The Zarion raid succeeded beyond the Empire's wildest dreams. Without human early warning systems, the slavers struck their targets with complete surprise. Entire colonies were captured before. Council forces even knew an attack was underway. By the time Council ships arrived, they found only empty settlements and scattered evidence of mass kidnapping. 50,000 civilians had been taken in a single week, more than the Empire had captured in the previous year combined. Meanwhile, Dr. Yil Andra struggled to contain a medical crisis that was spiraling out of control. A simple respiratory virus had emerged on Andros 7th, a minor world in the Outer Rim. Under normal circumstances, this would have been handled quickly with standard medical protocols. But nothing was standard anymore. The outbreak is spreading faster than our models predicted, reported Dr. Sektar, her Reptari colleague. 14 worlds are now reporting infections. What protocols are we following? Yelandra asked. the Galactic Health Organization's standard procedures for respiratory pandemics, Sektar replied. But the containment is failing. The virus is mutating faster than we can track. Yolandra pulled up the old case files from previous outbreaks. Every successful pandemic response in the past 20 years had followed the same pattern. The initial detection and classification came from alien health services, but the actual containment protocols had been developed and implemented by human medical teams. The humans had created sophisticated response networks that could track diseases across multiple star systems simultaneously. They had developed rapid deployment procedures for medical aid. Most importantly, they had trained specialized response teams that could adapt to new threats in real time. All of that expertise was gone. Contact the Terran Federation, Yolandra ordered. Request emergency medical assistance. Ma'am, Sektar said carefully, the humans are no longer part of the Council. We have no diplomatic channels to reach them. Then find unofficial channels. This plague could kill billions if we don't contain it soon. But their attempts to contact human medical authorities met with silence. The Terran Federation had withdrawn completely from Council space. Their communication networks no longer responded to alien transmissions. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the galaxy. As the pandemic spread to 20 worlds, then 30, then 50, the true scale of human medical contributions became clear. Every major hospital in Council space had been designed using human architectural principles. Every advanced surgical technique had been developed or refined by human doctors. Every sophisticated pharmaceutical production facility had been built with human technology. The aliens had the buildings and the machines, but they lacked the knowledge to use them effectively. Without human guidance, medical response times slowed dramatically. Treatment protocols failed. Simple diseases became deadly plagues. On the frontier, engineer Talrek watched the quantum beacon network collapse in spectacular fashion. The exotic, matter containment systems that powered the communication relays required constant adjustment and maintenance. Without human engineers, the delicate balance of forces began to fail. The cascade failure is accelerating, Talrek reported to his supervisor. We have lost 18 beacons in the past week. Can we stabilize the remaining systems? I do not believe so. The human technical manuals are incomplete. They appear to have omitted critical safety procedures. Talrek was wrong about the manuals being incomplete. The humans had provided detailed documentation for every system they built, but the manuals assumed a level of technical understanding that alien engineers simply did not possess. Human technology was not just advanced, it was fundamentally different, designed around human intuition and problem-solving methods that other species found difficult to replicate. As more beacons failed, entire sectors of space fell into communication. Blackout. Ships found themselves isolated, unable to call for help or navigate using quantum positioning systems. Trade between distant worlds ground to a halt. Scientific research projects that depended on real-time data sharing simply stopped functioning. But the most ominous development was something that only a few high-ranking officials knew about. Deep space monitoring stations were detecting massive energy signatures moving through the void beyond Council territory. The readings matched the warnings that human intelligence had provided months earlier, warnings that the Council had dismissed as paranoid fantasies. Admiral Creighton stared at the sensor data with growing dread. The formations were enormous. Hundreds of ships moving in perfect coordination. The energy signatures were unlike anything in Council databases. Most disturbing of all, the fleets were moving directly toward inhabited systems. How long until they reach our territory? Creighton asked. At current speed, approximately 6 months, his analyst replied. Do we have any information about their capabilities or intentions? 1 year after humanity's withdrawal, the invasion began. They came from the darkness between stars like a plague of metal locusts. 1,000,000 ships, each one the size of a city, erupted into normal space at 17 different points along the galaxy's rim. The vessels were unlike anything in Council databases. Organic curves mixed with mechanical precision, hulls that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue. Council Defense Coordinator Brekthos watched the tactical displays with mounting horror. How many ships did you say? Initial count suggests 1,000,000 individual vessels, sir, reported his analyst, a nervous Aquilian named Thelros. Energy signatures indicate massive weapons systems and some form of matter conversion technology. Matter conversion? Brekthos felt his scales turn cold. His draconian species had legends about creatures that consumed entire worlds, but he had always thought them myths. The lead elements have engaged frontier colonies at Kepler 9 and Belton Prime, Thelros continued. Our sensors show, sir, the planetary masses are decreasing. Explain. The enemy appears to be literally eating the planets. Converting solid matter into energy and new ships. Brekthos closed his eyes. These were the Devourers, the nightmare from deep space that human intelligence had warned about for over a year. The warnings that the Council had dismissed as human paranoia and warmongering. Implement Defense Protocol 7, Brekthos ordered. Deploy all available fleets to establish defensive positions. Sir, Thelros hesitated. Protocol 7 requires integration with the Terran Early Warning Network and assumes human tactical support. Then implement Protocol 4. That also requires human coordination systems, sir. Brekthos stared at his aide. What protocols can we implement without human support? Thelros checked his database. Basic Defense Protocol 1, sir. Individual I. Ship combat with minimal coordination. That protocol is designed for small pirate raids, not fleet battles. Yes, sir. But it's the only one that doesn't require human technical integration. The first battles were disasters. Council ships fought bravely but without coordination. Captains received contradictory orders as the command structure collapsed under the stress of managing a galactic war. Ships arrived at wrong positions, fired on their own allies, and wasted ammunition on targets that other vessels had already destroyed. The Devourers, by contrast, moved with perfect precision. Their ships flowed like schools of fish, responding to threats instantly and efficiently. They seemed to anticipate every Council tactic before it was implemented. Within a week, 12 star systems had fallen. The Devourers consumed everything: planets, moons, asteroids, even the stars themselves. They left behind empty space where thriving civilizations had existed for thousands of years. But while the Council military struggled, other reports began filtering in that painted a very different picture. Refugee ships fleeing the invasion brought stories that defied belief. Captain Yoltan of the merchant vessel Bright Horizon stumbled into Council space with 300 survivors from Belton Prime. He appeared before the emergency Council session looking shell-shocked and confused. "Tell us what happened," demanded Council Speaker Veltar. "The Devourers came without warning," Yoltan began. "Our defenses lasted maybe an hour. Everyone was running, trying to escape before the planet was consumed. Our engines failed in deep space. We thought we were dead. How did you survive?" asked Delegate Mordock. "Human ships found us," Yoltan said simply. 3 vessels with Terran markings. They repaired our engines, gave us food and medical supplies, and escorted us to safety. The council chamber fell silent. "Human ships?" Veltar asked. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely certain." The lead ship was commanded by Captain Jae Sung of the Terran Independent Fleet. He said they were conducting rescue operations for any survivors, regardless of species. More refugee reports followed. The human ship Mercy's Call had evacuated 2,000 civilians from Kepler-9 before the planet was consumed. The medical vessel Healing Light had established emergency treatment centers in neutral space, treating alien wounded without charge or condition. The transport Hope's Dawn had carried supplies to stranded refugee fleets, asking nothing in return. "This makes no sense," protested Delegate Karthos. "Why would the humans help us after how we treated them?" Dr. Ylandra, still fighting the pandemic that had now spread to over 100 worlds, had her own shocking discovery to report. "I have been reviewing the medical databases to understand why our containment efforts keep failing," she announced to the Emergency Council. "I found classified files that were sealed during the human withdrawal." "What kind of files?" Veltar asked. "Complete records of human activities in Council space over the past century. Every project, every intervention, every solution they provided." Yolandra's voice was heavy with guilt. "We never understood the full scope of what they were doing. For us." She activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy over the past 100 years. Slowly, dots of light began appearing across the star map. Red dots marked ecological disasters that had been prevented. Blue dots showed wars that had been quietly stopped through mediation. Green dots indicated technological crises that had been solved. Yellow dots marked medical emergencies that had been contained. The display filled with thousands of lights. Environmental engineer Kiwan prevented 17 ecological collapses, Yolandra read from her files. He worked without recognition or reward, developing solutions for problems that would have killed billions. More lights appeared on the map. Diplomat Haiwan mediated 43 territorial disputes that could have become wars. She spent decades traveling between hostile species, finding peaceful solutions to conflicts we never even knew existed. The lights continued to multiply. Researcher Do Hyun solved the Nexari energy crisis, the Aquilian water shortage, and the Reptari atmospheric poisoning. His solutions were implemented under alien names, while he remained anonymous. "Why?" whispered Delegate Zinhal. "Why did they help us in secret?" "Because they believed it was the right thing to do," Yilandra replied. "According to these files, human policy was to help whenever possible, regardless of recognition or reward. They called it moral obligation. The complete picture was staggering. Every major success in Council history had human fingerprints on it. Every crisis that had been averted, every disaster that had been prevented, every breakthrough that had advanced galactic civilization, all of it had been quietly supported by human expertise and labor." Meanwhile, Admiral Sung Min appeared on secured communication channels, broadcasting to any Council forces that could receive his signal. The grizzled human officer looked tired but determined. "This is Admiral Sung Min of the Terran Defense Force," his message began. "We are monitoring the Devourer invasion and offer our assistance to any forces fighting against this threat. We ask nothing in return except permission to operate in Council space." The irony was not lost on anyone. The same military forces that the Council had expelled for being too aggressive were now volunteering to defend the very species that had rejected them. Council Speaker Veltar found himself facing an impossible choice. Pride demanded that the Zodiac Council handle the crisis alone, but practical reality showed that they were losing badly. The Devourers had consumed 20 star systems and showed no signs of slowing down. "What are our casualties?" Veltar asked during a closed session. "Conservative estimates suggest 40 billion dead," reported Admiral Creighton. "The Devourers are advancing on multiple fronts. Our defensive lines are collapsing." "And the human offer of assistance?" "Their fleets are already engaging Devourer forces on the rim. Early reports suggest they are having some success." Veltar looked around the chamber at his fellow delegates. The proud aliens who had dismissed human concerns so casually now faced the destruction of their civilization. The species they had called emotional and irrational were the only ones offering help in their darkest hour. "There is something else," Admiral Creighton added quietly. "Intelligence reports suggest the humans have been preparing for this invasion for years. They have weapons and tactics specifically designed to fight the Devourers." "How is that possible?" "According to our analysis, they began development immediately after their withdrawal from Council space. They used the time we thought they were sulking to prepare for the greatest threat in galactic history." The silence in the chamber was deafening. While the Council had dismissed human warnings and celebrated their departure, humanity had been working tirelessly to protect the very civilizations that had rejected them. "Prepare a message," Veltar said finally. "Address it to the Terran Federation leadership." His aide activated the recording system. Veltar took a deep breath and began. What would be the most difficult speech of his life? "This is Council Speaker Veltar of the Galactic Harmony Council. I am formally requesting emergency assistance from the Terran Federation. I was wrong. We were all wrong. Your people saw threats we ignored, offered solutions we dismissed, provided aid we scorned. We called you emotional, irrational, chaotic. We were the fools." Veltar paused, gathering his courage for what came next. "I am asking for your help not because we deserve it, but because billions of innocent lives hang in the balance. I offer no excuses for our treatment of humanity." 2 years after humanity's departure, Council Speaker Veltar stood in the ruins of SciFiPrime. The once mighty capital of galactic civilization was now a broken shell. Twisted metal structures reached toward a smoke-filled sky like the bones of some massive dead creature. The air smelled of ash and defeat. Half of Council space was gone, consumed by the Devourers and turned into more of their nightmare ships. 50 systems, hundreds of billions of people, all reduced to empty darkness in the span of months. Veltar's blue skin had lost its healthy shimmer. His clothes were dirty and torn. The proud leader, who had once dismissed human concerns with casual arrogance, now looked like a refugee in his own territory. Because that was exactly what he had become. Around him, makeshift camps stretched for kilometers. Tents and temporary shelters housed the survivors of a dozen species. Aquilians huddled next to Reptari. Catherian children played with young Draconians. Species that had argued about trade agreements now shared their last scraps of food. "Speaker." "Veltar," called Dr. Yelandra as she approached through the camp. The medical coordinator looked exhausted. She had been working without sleep for days, trying to treat the endless stream of wounded and sick refugees. "What is our current situation?" Veltar asked. "Critical on all fronts," Yelandra replied. "We have 3 million refugees in this camp, alone. Food supplies will last maybe 2 weeks. Medical supplies are nearly gone, and the plague has reached the outer settlements." Veltar closed his eyes. The respiratory virus that had started on Andros 7th now infected over 200 worlds. Without human medical expertise, the pandemic had spiraled completely out of control. What should have been a minor outbreak had become another extinction threat. "Any word from the Defense Forces?" he asked. "Admiral Creighton reports that our lines are holding at the Meridian system, but barely. The Devourers have adapted to our tactics. They learn from every battle and become stronger." Veltar nodded grimly. The enemy ships seemed to evolve in real time, copying successful strategies and discarding failed ones. Fighting them was like battling a living organism that grew smarter with each encounter. "Sir," Ylandra continued quietly, "there is one more thing. We received a response to your message." Veltar's hearts jumped. 3 days ago, in a moment of complete desperation, he had sent a humiliating plea for help to the Terran Federation. He had expected silence, or perhaps a message telling the Council to solve their own problems. What did they say? The response came from Admiral Jinwoo of the Terran Independent Fleet, Ylandra said, handing him a data pad. "They are already moving to assist us." Veltar read the message with growing amazement. The humans were not just offering help, they were already providing it. Medical ships were en route to refugee camps throughout Council space. Defense fleets were moving to engage Devourer forces at the Outer Rim. Supply convoys were carrying food and medicine to stranded populations, all without asking for payment, recognition, or promises of future cooperation. "Why?" Veltar asked aloud. "After everything we did to them, why would they help us?" "I asked Admiral Jinwoo the same question," Ylandra replied. His answer was simple. "Because that's who we are. We don't help people because they deserve it. We help because they need it." The first human ships arrived that evening. Veltar watched from a hilltop as 3 massive vessels descended through the smoky atmosphere. The lead ship bore the blue and white insignia of the Terran Federation, colors that had once seemed so ordinary but now looked like symbols of hope. The ships landed in the refugee camps with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, crews were unloading medical supplies and setting up treatment centers. Human doctors worked alongside alien medics, sharing their knowledge freely and asking nothing in return. Captain So Young commanded the relief operation. The middle-aged human woman moved through the camps with quiet authority, organizing aid distribution and coordinating with local officials. When she reached Veltar, she saluted respectfully. "Speaker Veltar," she said. "Captain So Young of the medical vessel Sanctuary. We're here to help with refugee coordination and medical treatment." "Captain," Veltar replied, struggling to find words. We are grateful for your assistance, but I must ask, why are you helping us? Your people owe us nothing." So, Young looked out over the sprawling refugee camps. Alien families huddled around small fires. Children cried for parents they would never see again. Elderly beings sat in quiet despair, their entire worlds consumed by the Devourers. "Because they're suffering," So Young said simply. "That's reason enough." Over the following weeks, more human ships arrived. Not just military vessels, but civilian transports, cargo, haulers, even private yachts pressed into service as rescue ships. Ordinary human citizens had volunteered their time and resources to help the same alien species that had rejected their government. Dr. Yunji returned to establish emergency medical centers. The same doctor who had been forced to abandon Kepler Station now worked tirelessly to save alien lives in temporary hospitals. She trained refugee medics in human surgical techniques, sharing knowledge that the Council had once tried to ban. Engineer Bo Ram led teams that restored basic infrastructure to damaged worlds, the quantum communication systems that had failed. After human withdrawal were rebuilt and improved. Emergency shelters were constructed using human engineering principles that could withstand devourer attacks. But the most impressive sight was the fleet commanded by Admiral Sung Min. Human warships that had been dismissed as too aggressive now formed the backbone of galactic defense. Their crews fought with desperate courage against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. The humans had learned from their intelligence gathering. Their ships were equipped with weapons specifically designed to penetrate devourer hulls. Their tactics exploited weaknesses that only years of study had revealed. Most importantly, they fought as a coordinated whole, something the fractured Council forces had never managed to achieve. "How are they so effective?" Admiral Creighton asked during a joint strategy meeting. "Preparation and unity," Admiral Sung Min replied. "We spent 2 years studying the devourer threat and developing counter-strategies. Our forces train together and fight as one people. But the Council has hundreds of species with different capabilities," which is exactly the problem, Sung Min interrupted gently. "You spend so much time accommodating different approaches that you never develop a unified strategy. Every species fights their own way, and the enemy exploits that division." Creighton felt shame wash over him. Even in their moment of desperate need, the humans were teaching them lessons about cooperation and unity. The turning point came at the Battle of Meridian. Devourer forces launched their largest assault yet, throwing 500,000 ships at the last major defensive line protecting the galactic core. Council forces were outnumbered 3-1 and facing inevitable defeat. Then the human fleets arrived, not just the official Terran military, but volunteer fleets from across human space. Cargo captains flying armed freighters, scientists piloting, research vessels fitted with improvised weapons. Even civilian families in converted passenger ships, carrying supplies and evacuating wounded. The humans fought with a desperate fury that amazed their alien allies. They threw their ships at Devourer, formations without hesitation, buying time for refugee evacuations. They shared their ammunition freely and covered alien retreats at the cost of their own lives. But more than their courage, it was their unity that made the difference. Every human ship followed the same tactics, used compatible communication systems, and supported their allies automatically. They fought like a single organism with 1,000,000 parts. The Devourers, for the first time since their invasion began, were stopped. Their advance halted at Meridian as human sacrifice bought time for proper defenses to be established. In the aftermath of the battle, Veltar found himself working directly with Admiral Jin Woo to coordinate refugee relief. The human officer was professional and efficient, showing no trace of anger or resentment toward the species that had rejected his people. "Admiral," Veltar said during a quiet moment, "I need to apologize, not just for myself, but for all of us. We were wrong. About humanity, about everything." Jinwoo looked thoughtful. "Speaker Veltar, you don't need to apologize to me. Save your energy for building something better." "What do you mean?" "The Galactic Harmony Council is finished," Jinwoo said bluntly. "It failed because it valued profit over people and politics, over principles. But that doesn't mean galactic civilization has to end." Over the following months, as human and alien forces gradually pushed back the Devourer invasion, a new structure began to emerge. The Alliance of Free Worlds was built on very different principles than the old council. Instead of trade profits, it prioritized protecting the vulnerable. Instead of national interests, it focused on shared welfare. Veltar found himself serving as a junior coordinator in refugee services working under human supervision. The irony was not lost on him. The former head of galactic government now took orders from the species he had once dismissed as emotional and irrational. But he had learned something important in the ruins of his civilization. The humans had been right about what mattered. Not trade agreements or territorial disputes, but simple compassion for suffering beings.